we're now going to be using the render from view, the procedural terrain, and the XYZ normal or multipass output for the normal, and making it into a seamless texture we can use. Now, when I went to open my PSD file, from saving the output, it was black, and it did look like there was a problem. So if that happens, what you can do is just go back into View, browse a previous render. Providing that you're using the render stack, you can come back and access the render from the render stack, switch back to the XYZ normal, and then go to Save, select the PSD output, and the file you saved before, go to Options, 16-bit, turn off embed alpha information, and overwrite it, and then it should work. It looks like sometimes there's something that interferes with the saving of the scene. Sometimes if you still have the scene open, it's happened to me a couple of times. So you should be able to just go to the render stack and keep that option on to save the render out just in case, or use a different format, maybe EXR format, 32-bit, and then downgrade it to a 16-bit. Now, if we're going to be using, or I'm planning on using this for the rocks in View, so we don't need to have a texture that's this large, but what we can actually do is use this initial render to create several different textures from this initial render at a smaller scale. If you rendered with a lower anti-aliasing, or the anti-aliasing isn't quite suitable, there's a lot of maybe pixelation within it. What you can do is reduce the image size, go to the image size, change the percent, it's about 50%, and then change the resampling mode. Bicubic. Basically, any of the bicubic modes will work for this. Should work fine. To remove the jaggedness. Bicubic sharper if you want to keep some of the sharper elements more defined. But we could just use bicubic and still get a more smoothed anti-alias look to the normal map. I'm just going to go ahead and undo it. I'm going to be using image interpolation, so if there is a little bit of jaggedness, it'll get removed by the image interpolation of View. What I want to do is Control N, or you can go to File, New, create a new document. I'm just going to make one that is 128 pixels by 128 pixels, 16-bit. Because it doesn't have to be very large. And then what we can do is just either right-click and duplicate this layer over to the untitled document, or we could Control A to select all, copy, and then paste it over to the other document. What we want to do is just kind of move this into position to give us a good amount of features. Now this is more for smaller rocks. If you're going to be rendering a lot closer, you can set up a higher resolution image. But we just want to make it seamless, which is a lot easier to do with a smaller image. So just set it up there, that should be good. C on the keyboard, or go to the crop tool and drag the outer bounds. Make sure that the crop area is set to delete. And then what we can do is go to Filter, Other, and Offset, and just offset it by the size of the document, or half of the size of the document. So we'll go ahead and do 64 by 64. And then we're going to see the seams. And I just went ahead and added my navigator down to the lower right here. And we can just zoom in, and we're going to switch to the clone stamping tool. Set our hardness to around 50, our size maybe a little smaller. Doesn't have to be huge. And then we can just start sampling. Hold down the Alt key and click the left mouse button. And just fill in those seams. Grabbing from the left and then switching to the right in order to sort of mix them together a little better. And then for up and down, you kind of start from the top, clone it, and then grab sections from the bottom below the seam line. And that way it kind of blends in a little better. Of course, it does depend on the map itself. Now the seams are basically gone, and we can use this as a normal map for the rocks. So I'm going to go ahead and save this out. Actually, before I save it, I do want to flatten the image. And then I'm going to save it out. And I'm just going to call it StrataRock A01, and I'm saving in the PNG format, which will accept the 16-bit. No interlacing. And now we've got a seamless map that we can apply to rocks. If you want to make the larger image seamless, if you want to say use it on a baked terrain, which will accept normals, then what we can do is go to the filter and just offset this larger image. And just, you could use about half of the amount of the total image to offset it, or a little bit less, just enough so you can see the seams and work with them so they're not too close to the edge. And then we could just clone stamp that over in order to make this entire image seamless. So the same way as we did before. And here's a render of that texture map, seamless texture map just made, applied to one of the rocks within Vue. Sometimes it is necessary to invert the Y on the render for it to work on the object correctly because of the different mapping modes and how the texture is being projected onto it. And the easiest way to do that is really to edit the image. So we can open it up in Photoshop, go over to our channels, select the green channel, and just Control-I on the keyboard to invert. You can go ahead and save it. Vue should automatically recognize that it has been changed. If not, we can go into the Links tab, right-click, and reload the link. And then you can see the difference between the inverted Y and the direction change. So it really depends on the mapping. For the most part, because the type of normal and the kind of object it's on, and the fact that you really won't see it all that closely far away, it really doesn't matter. You get a lot of flexibility with it. You could even go into the material for the normal and rotate the image around 180 degrees to have it reverse the direction of the normal. And that works just about the same way as flipping around the individual channels. You can even go halfway, make something a little more interesting. And because this normal map isn't really relative to the actual normal, we can get away with a lot of manipulation in the rotation without really destroying the detail or the look of the image. And here's another render showing the higher resolution map being used as the normal. So if you're a little bit closer, you might need to use something higher res. That'll also work better for terrains and normal mapping on larger objects.